Hi, welcome back. I'm Camille and this is Camille Made, my little corner of the internet where I get to talk about my love for knitting. As you can see, I have a lot of stuff to talk about for this knitting podcast, so I'm probably just gonna get right into it because there is a lot. So yeah, this podcast will follow the same format as all knitting podcasts: finished objects, work in progress, and any acquisitions. And I have quite a bit, which is surprising, but I'm really excited to talk about them nonetheless. But let's start with some finished objects. Just to preface, there will be a little knitting and sewing in this video, so yeah, I'm sorry. You can kind of skip through those sewing bits if you're not here for it, or you can skip through the knitting bits if you're not here for it. But we're gonna get right into it. And the first object is this Kindle case that I didn't use a pattern for. I just got the measurements of a Kindle and made it. It's a belated Christmas gift for someone. I really just need to mail it out. But this fabric is from a top that I had thrifted, and then I quilted some squiggly lines down. I did a bow closure at the top, and then I used this scrap lace that I had to ruffle and just put all around the edges and finished it off with my Made by Camille label. I think it actually says with love Camille, but yes, that is the first finished object, and I'm super happy with how it turned out. I hope I can make it to the post office soon so I can ship it to the lovely recipients. Okay, let's talk about the next thing, which I'm super excited to talk about, and that is my Collage Gather top by Matchy Matchy Sewing Club. I'll insert some pictures so you can see some of the details a little bit more close up, but okay, let's talk about this. So every single year for my mom's birthday, I commit to making a handmade item. So last year it was the Novice Slipover by Petite Knit in Illimani Amelie Brown. That was actually the first garment that I had made. That was really when I was finding my love for knitting. And so I made that for her, and then the year before I made a Japanese apron, which is the apron that you kind of just pull over your head and it crisscrosses in the back. And I had done a little applique, some embroidery, and that was her birthday present 2 years ago. So this year I made her a top, and I absolutely love this. The original Collage Gather top is made with two different fabrics, so you would have the same fabric for the front and the back panel, and then the side panels would be a contrasting fabric. However, I used fabric from my stash and I couldn't exactly find two fabrics that came together to meet the memo, so I ended up just using this thrifted fabric that I had, which is so her colorway. It's like this gray green with some olive, and then when I finished the top, it was really beautiful. The fabric can definitely stand on its own, but I was like, it needs a little bit more, so I ended up hand embroidering some flowers and then machine sewing stems going down. And then I did some applique with some fabric that I had left over from a Silver Saga Patterns blouse that I had made earlier in the year, and then I hand stitched on top of that, and then of course finished it off with a label that says with love Camille, and you have this top. I'm so happy with it. I will say the pattern says it's made for 5'5" bodies, so it's made with a kind of cropped fit to begin with, and it does say if you want a longer fit to add length to the pieces that you cut. So I ended up adding an inch of length to the pieces, and I think it ended up perfect. It's cropped, but it's not as cropped that my mom wouldn't really love to wear it. So I'm so happy with how this turned out, and I'm so excited to give it to her. So those are all of my sewing finished objects, and I have one knitting finished object, and I feel like that's really exciting to say. We're only on, today is January the 6th, and I have a finished object. I had actually cast this on the 2nd of January, and at first I was like, when I saw everyone knitting these slippers, I was like, I don't really need a pair, and I didn't really gravitate as much to the pattern as maybe some other people. But obviously I ended up caving and I made myself a pair of sailor slippers by Annie Germain. And this is another stash busting project. So if you watched my stash busting video from last month, I dedicated all of December 2025 to completely stash busting. And when I was looking through my stash at the beginning of this year, so on January, I was like, oh, I could squeeze one more stash busting project out of here. So I ended up making the Annie slippers because I had some leftover Plymouth yarn aire from my Nanaimo cardigan. And then What's Millie Making had mentioned that Michael's, a U.S. craft store, USA-based craft store, was carrying the Lion Brand yarn Wool East Roving Origins in Lilac. And so I ended up holding this triple and making these. I didn't do the, you can see that there's a variation in the height of my stripes, which I really like. I like that, but they're also the same. And then on the edge here, I had some leftover Plymouth yarn, Galway worsted in navy from another project. So I just ended up putting that for just like a little differentiation. But I got through a good bit of my Plymouth yarn aire in Naples blue, so I'm pretty happy with that. And I want to talk about like the felting process. So I knit the second size, which fits perfectly, but when I was trying to felt them in the washing machine, it just wasn't working. And I put tea towels in there and I tried, but what I ultimately ended up doing was soaking the slippers completely and then throwing them in the dryer for multiple cycles, and they felted down to exactly what I needed. And then the rest of it I just kind of laid on a blocky mat and let it air dry. But I think they're perfect. Of course, they're a little wide, but I think when you take on knitting this pattern, you already know that it's going to be slightly wider, but I think it fits the length of my foot perfectly. So I'm happy with how these turned out, and that's all I have for finished objects. So let's get into my whips. Okay, I cleared a little space off my couch because there was a little too much crinkling. But okay, let's get into my works in progress. And the first one is my Neck Warmer 35 by Thea Vesterby. So I got the front and the back panels done. And now I'm just working on the collar. It's in 1x1 rib. It's taking a hot second, as do really tall collars always do, but I did make a modification. So the pattern is originally written for more of like a fitted turtleneck, and then you fold it down on itself in the front. Aesthetically, that's just not something that I love, seeing like the folded down portion. And then I do not gravitate towards turtlenecks just because I think I have a rather large head, and so turtlenecks are not the most flattering on me. That being said, in order to combat that, I picked up 40 more stitches for the neckline than what the pattern had called for. So I have more of like a cowl neck look. I just like how wide that collar is. And I kind of wanted a similar look for that. So wider collar, it's going to take a little while because I basically need to do 2/3 more of the collar, and then I'm going to bind down and fold it down on itself simultaneously to have just a more structured collar. If I just did like a tubular bind off at the top, I think I'd end up with a little more floppy of a collar, and I think I just want something with a little more structure perhaps, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. This was a completely stash busting project. I am using the blue Sky Fibers Woolstok in Driftwood and whatever mohair I had in stash, which was Isager silk mohair. I think it was the colorway 2S, and then whatever their white is. And then I ran out, so I ran out on the collar, which is fine. You can't really tell that much of a color differentiation with or without the mohair. So yeah, I feel good getting this out of my stash, and hopefully we'll finish it sometime soon. Because I'm just working on the collar, it's just become something that comes on the go with me. So if I'm sitting in the car and my husband's driving, then I'll work on it, or if I'm sitting around, then I'll just bring this project in my purse because it's small enough to fit. But yeah, I have a little ways to go on the collar, and luckily enough for me, it's warmed up here a little bit in Atlanta. So I don't need this immediately, but I would like to have it done before the actual cold weather arrives. So I just need to work on it inch by inch, day by day, and just add a little bit more. And then my other work in progress is my handy cardigan, which I'll be working on a project blog for, just to go a little more in depth on my thoughts. And I haven't gotten very far on this project, so I don't have a lot of thoughts. But it is the most delicious green you have ever seen. And I got the back panel of my handy cardigan done, and I got the right front and the left front. Did I even mention what this is? This is the handy cardigan by Knitters and Friends. I am knitting a size 3, and I know probably for someone of my size it should be a size 1, but I love oversized things, and I know the pattern is written with positive ease, but I love all the positive ease that I can get without it looking ridiculous on me. So I did cast on for a size 3, and I was originally going to do a size 2, but I actually for once knit a gauge swatch and found that I was 2 stitches short width-wise. I know it's just 2 stitches, but 2 stitches adds up in the long run. So yeah, I ended up casting on a size 3. This is a DK weight cardigan, and for the yarn, I'm using Purl Soho line weight, held double, and the colorway Clover Green, held with a strand of their Mohair, which is the Tussock in Lucky Green, to reach somewhat near gauge. But yeah, I did the right front, and I'm just working on the left front increases. I'm loving how this is turning out. This is my first DK weight garment that I've ever made, and so it is taking a little bit longer to see progress than if you would be knitting it in worsted weight, but that's fine. I am so excited to see how this turns out. A little nervous when it comes to the double knit button band because I just haven't knit a project requiring that construction yet, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful. So yes, those are my 2 works in progress, and I'm really, really, really happy about those. I don't think I have anything more to say about my whips. So we'll get straight into the acquisitions. Okay, let's start with my yarn acquisitions. If you've seen my Make 9, I mentioned that I want to make the Frey sweater by Amelie and Thea M. And I already had the Lion brand Fisherman wool that I purchased off eBay in the colorway Oatmeal. I got a pack of 3 for a pretty discounted price, and I've worked with this yarn before. I don't have that much of an itch factor, especially because I held it with like a Sayer Silk Mohair. This time I'm going to be holding it with the Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair. So I purchased a couple of balls of this from Wool & Co, and so this is the colorway Marzipan. I think it'll lighten up the oatmeal just a little bit. And then for the contrast color, and I know you probably think, oh, it's not too much of a contrast, but I did want a very soft kind of demure look for this sweater. I purchased the Illimani Amelie in white from my local yarn store, The Craftivist, and I am so excited to work on this. I'm trying to get a little bit more done on my handy cardigan before I can justify casting on another sweater. And when I was shopping around Wool & Co for the mohair for that project, I ended up picking up this beautiful sock yarn. So this is the Leading Men Fiber Arts Sparkle Sock Yarn in Poseidon. I'll show a close-up of this because obviously this is not going to do justice me holding it up like this, but I am planning to make a pair of socks for my best friend. I'll put like pattern ideas up, something with a ruffle for sure. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. And yeah, that's all I have for yarn acquisitions. Not much to say about that. And I purchased some DPN, so these are US 2.5 3mm needles for my handy cardigan button band for when we get to that point. And then when I was walking around my local yarn store, I also saw this book, which is Threads by Madeleine Kemsley, and it is a hand embroidery design book. And recently, especially because I just worked on a sewing project with hand embroidery, I've just felt really inspired by this form of fiber arts, and I think some of the designs that she has are just really fun. You've got some fishes, and I just love how organic the stitching is. I don't know if that's the correct word that I would use for that, but if you get what I'm saying, you get what I'm saying, and that bird. So I have a pair of pants in my wardrobe. They're ready-made, just balloon pants that I have that I want to try some hand embroidery on, and I think it's just going to add a little more uniqueness and like oomph to my wardrobe, hopefully. So yeah, I will say embroidery takes a lot longer knitting wise, in my opinion. I mean, you'll get a finished product in probably like 2 days or so, but it does take a little bit longer. So I do have to exhibit a lot more patience in hand embroidery than I do with knitting, where I can like whip out a lot of stitches in a minute versus hand embroidery. So that's the book that I got. And then I wanted to talk about some fabric that I purchased at the craft reuse store called Scraplanta that's located in the metropolitan Atlanta area. They have just like every single craft supply you can think of, but they're all recycled goods, so things people have donated. And so I got this fabric, which you've seen on my collage gather top, and I also purchased, I don't know the fabric composition of any of these, but I also purchased this beautiful fabric, and I don't know if I'm going to make pillows, but I also mentioned wanting to make a chore coat, and I think that this fabric would be so unique in a possible quilt block. I got this fabric, which I think is a piece of art all on its own because the designs are so set apart, but you have these like really big flowers that are, I don't know, they're very beautiful. They feel very like vintage inspired to me. So I have that fabric, and let me just round out all the floral fabrics already, which I got this like woven kind of, it has a bit of a sheen to it, and it just has a bow, some flowers, and this is probably more like tapestry fabric for like blankets and stuff, but I like the rigidity for a possible chore coat. I think it's just like just thick enough to hold its structure. And when I was picking out those fabrics, I also saw this like just blue-gray linen fabric that I thought would be really pretty in contrast to the florals. And then just to round it out, I got these two fabrics, and this is like a rusty red orange satin fabric, and this is a very, it's like almost the same thickness of a denim, dark green fabric that I am making some belated Christmas crafts for. I know Christmas has already passed, but I don't know. So I know there's like no need for me to have these fabrics right now and to work with them right now, but I'm just gonna hold on to them in stash because I really did love this colorway. But that's all I have for this knitting podcast. It was a very quick one, and sorry if I talk a little fast. I'll try to work on that. I know just naturally I speak really rapidly, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much if you made it this far, and I hope your New Year is off to a good start, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye!